we've just rebranded a little bit. And so I want to first off thank KTL and everybody who's here. First off, KTL for having me and everybody here. I know that there's probably a myriad of different reasons why you came today, but we all have kind of those unique business challenges. And what I'm excited to show you is a project that we've been working on here internally for about a year and a half. And so we released this product to the general public less than a month ago. It's been very popular, very successful. And hopefully today what I'll be able to do is give you a general overview of what it is in general, like what does it solve, how do I use it, what are the types of users that are within the module, and then also how would I report on it, because it's obviously one of the challenges with any relational database is very great at capturing information, but notoriously difficult for getting the data out. Okay, and so that is what we do. We're the data people, and now we do have the ability to assist with budgeting as well. So the agenda today, I mean, it's pretty straightforward. We're just going to talk about what the product is, what the type of users are, and really most of this piece is demo. So there's no real slides for that. Core features. So if anyone is familiar with Excel Online, we leverage Excel Online for web-based budgeting. We also leverage Excel locally, but the whole idea behind taking a while to build this is we took this through a very extensive beta program, and these were the core features that everyone was asking for, is that they had lots of manual processes around data entry into Excel, manually manipulating the information or consolidating it, and then having to keep track of what was the right version, what is the master copy, what has been changed, when is this information due. And honestly, the attachment support that you see right here was a big piece, because a lot of the times those supporting documents, they could be outdated. And so they wanted just really simplified workflow in terms of how do I communicate with the people who are contributing to this budget, how do I make sure that we stay on task, and how do I make it easy for everybody to know what it is that we're trying to accomplish within a given year. And so a lot of the beta participants, what they found is instead of just budgeting for a full year, which they did, they were able to recast or reforecast quarterly, because it was just much simpler. Once the data is in there, you can easily copy and use that budget templates or any of the information that you're sharing out on any budget. So any JET user also can participate in the budgeting process. These are the owners or the roles, sorry. The first one is budget owner, and so they are the gatekeeper. Okay, so there's one budget owner per budget. They create, edit, and have final approval of those budgets. There are contributors. You can have as many of those as you want. They enter data into the budget, and then a budget approver is the one who maybe reviews and approves the submitted budgets. Okay, and so you can have multiple contributors, multiple approvers. There's one gatekeeper. So the budget owner has kind of the final say. The budgeting process, so sole user. So if you are using this just on your own, creating a budget, the structure, work items, entering, submitting, and reporting, those are all very kind of straightforward things. What we're going to be exploring today a little bit more is the collaborative process, where we're actually adding users to a budget and allowing them to approve data or enter data themselves. In general, this is the budget flow. It might look a little confusing at first, but just think of it as the budget basically flows down, into specific tasks, and those tasks, once they're accomplished, are sent for approval or sent to someone to actually accomplish them. So they enter the data online or enter it into Excel, and then it kind of goes through this cycle here. What we're going to be looking at is the entering of data and then also the overall creation of the actual budget. Maybe I'll just hop into it. I mean, this is really just explaining what I'm about to show. So one of the questions we get a lot actually is around this structure piece, which you'll see is very straightforward in terms of being able to create the roll-ups and rollouts at various budget levels. And the whole advantage to that is to be able to see a snapshot of everything all at once. So that's really what's great about it. And the user management is all done in the web. So I'm going to exit out of here. Looks like I need to re-sign in. And so just so everybody knows, the Jet Hub comes with all the paid versions of Jet, and so it's not like an additional add-on or anything like that, but it is where the actual Jet budgets component lives. And so when someone signs into the Jet Hub, over here on the left, they're going to have an app picker. So there is a reporting side where you can actually store reports in the web as well, distribution, but the Jet budget side is what we're going to focus on for now. And you can see here I have two different budgets. I have a 2019 and 2018. One thing I want you to see is if I click on this budget here, you can easily copy this. So once you've done all the work, which we'll run through here in a second, it would be very easy to copy that to the next year, to the next quarter, to the next half year. So once the work is done, you can easily use what you've already created. If you added in new segment codes or new accounts, you can easily just refresh them here. When I click on the details tab, this is where we can see really kind of where everything is at. If it's in progress, if it's been started, it's bolded. I'm actually going to go back and start a new one. But the budget owner, they have basically full control over what this is called. So we can call this, we'll call this a half-year forecast.
And just a reminder to everyone, if you have any questions, please type them in the chat box and we'll answer them as we go along or get to most of them at the end.
Awesome. Yeah, and I cannot see the chat box, so if anyone does have a question, feel free to just make yourself known. And so in any event, I'm going to just select a date range. So I selected a data source, and then I selected a company, and now I'm going to select a date range. I'm going to do the half year. And now it's going to ask which segment is used for your natural account. In mine, it's actually segment 2. I only have 3 segments, but it would show all of yours here. And then you can choose what else you want to pull in for reporting purposes. So because I only have 3, they're all very relevant. Segment 1 is department and segment 3 is location. And so I'm going to pull them all into the budgeting process. Perfect. So what we see here is really just the title of our budget, right? And nothing else. And so when we go to the users pane, you can see no users have been added. So I'm going to go ahead and add some users here. I already have some stored from my Active Directory. As you can see, very creative names there. So we have an approver and a contributor. And so we'll go back to the overview. And this is where basically we see what we've done. Work is where we spend most of our time. And so when I right click on this, I can actually add sections. So we can call this expenses. We can call this revenue. And you can move these around however you want, right? So if I had more, I only have a couple here right now, but let's go ahead and add a section here. We'll call this payroll. And maybe I wanted it actually to be under HR. So maybe HR has more than just payroll expenses. and you can actually add that, you see. So really easy to create those roll-ups and rollouts. And I'm not going to dive too deep into that. I mean, that's pretty straightforward. But once you've created the structure, really it's up to you as far as how you actually enter the data into the budget itself. So there's two different things that can assist with this. One is having the work item itself assigned to you. So if you know, maybe it's more of a fixed cost. Maybe it's just rent. And so in rent, there's a fixed cost over time. I'm just going to enter the data myself, and maybe that's a good one to do. So let's go ahead and add that section in here. We'll call this rent. And so when I say enter the data myself, it's now going to ask me to name it. You know, we can name this whatever we want. So we'll just call it rent. And over here on the left is where you're going to see your chart of accounts. Okay. And so basically what you do is you just choose a range or specific accounts that are associated with this particular expense, in my case, which it happens to be rent. Maybe it's just the first section here. Maybe it's just all kind of coming back to admin expense. And we'll go ahead and use segment 1 for admin, and then maybe only a couple of locations actually expense that particular expense. So now that I have this done, basically what we're saying is we'd like to enter information by hitting finish, and then it gives you a choice. You can enter the data online or enter it into Excel. If I choose to enter this online, this is where we're using Excel Online. And so one thing I want you to keep in mind, it is not the full version of Excel. But it does have some basic functionality where we can actually add in, maybe I want to multiply this by a certain percentage point, but it is fairly limited. And so I'll just show you a good example. We'll say maybe it's 20,000 in rent across the top, but I want this to equal this amount times 0.95. Maybe it's only 95% or something. And now this will carry over. Okay. And so this is really where simple data entry would happen, but it's very fast, right? And so we're not having to kind of recreate anything really. We just kind of can pull this all over. And so you see the math carried through, but again, it's meant for simple data entry. And then once you're done, you can hit save or save and submit. In this case, I'm actually the approver as well. So if I hit save and submit, it's actually going to show up in my work items as an approved item. Okay, so this is different than if I had assigned this to somebody. So over here under preview data, if this had been submitted to me, I would actually see what information had been placed here in the budget itself. And I would have a choice to share a note back to that individual saying, you know, this is close, but not exactly what I was looking for, and give them reasons as to why, and then resubmit that to them. It would actually queue up an email, which would be sent to them with the note attached. So they would say, they would see with full transparency why it was not approved, and there could be collaboration taking place through that process. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to the beginning. And so we did kind of the first part of this. Actually, we did the first part of this, and you can see here, this is now set to approved. And because the only expense that I have right now is rent, it's basically rolled everything up and said, you know, the rent section is done. One thing that can be very beneficial as well is being able to enter this data into Excel. So for payroll, for example, if I add a new work item and I choose to enter this data myself again, and then we'll go ahead and select the payroll account, and we'll say, in this case, we're going to do payroll We'll tie it back to admin, and each location has their own payroll. So we'll go ahead and hit finish. And so I can enter this data into Excel, which I chose to. And what it does is it downloads an Excel file. And when I open this up, what we see is the specific chart of accounts, right? And so a couple of things that I want to point out as we're rolling through this demonstration. What we've seen up to this point has really just been budget owner. And a budget owner is usually someone who's very familiar with the GL, the actual chart of accounts. And so they're the ones who are creating the actual structure. Most of the users and or contributors to the budget module itself throughout our beta were actually not all budget owners. They were contributors and approvers and really just come from all walks of business. And so one of the things that I want to point out is they don't have to know what these actual account segment codes mean. Okay, so to give you a good example of that, I actually took some of what was happening during the beta program and rolled it into this demo today so you can see this. So for example, if I was to want to create an actual forecast or expected sales, usually there's quite a bit of information that goes into where this number is actually coming from. I've taken part in that process here, and before Jet Budgets, it was very time consuming and a lot of back and forth on how to actually manage the expectations for the following year. So what we went through was this workshop where you can actually take your drivers and actually build them into your budget. And so during this workshop, users were asking, a myriad of different questions, but at the end of the day, really what it comes down to is, what do those end users have to know, right? And so when you illuminate it and make it this easy for them, they could just simply say, well, I know we're only going to be working 19 days, all of January. And all of these numbers change for them. And so right now we have, just the two tabs, just maybe what you've been using historically to do budgets. But when we move over into this Excel document, what we see now is the ability to cell references. So maybe each location here has its own manager. And so now I can say, okay, let's go ahead and go over to January, and I'm going to say equals this right here, this actual cell, and then I can drag this down and drag this over, and you can see it actually matches the numbers that are over here now. So 47, 49, 52, you have 47, 59, 49, 52, okay? And so now when I'm over here, I can say, I actually think that our driver is different. That updates, so we have 56, 59, 62, and you can see that is updated into the GL. So what's really the overarching benefit of this is the flexibility of Excel is there when you want it. You don't have to be in Excel, but when you want the flexibility and the power of being able to integrate custom calculations or give that average end user who doesn't know anything about the GL a place to enter their information, that's what this is for, right? And so that in itself can be a very powerful way of collaborating with users who have valuable input into where the numbers should actually be. And then once this is done, all the user has to do, they fill out their side, because you've already kind of cell referenced and given them the framework. They just click send to budget. That's it. The supporting document comes with it, and the data entry piece goes into the workflow section of the web, and then it would show up as something that's in progress. Okay? Or submitted. If I had actually hit the submit button, it would show submitted. Right
Mike,
now,
we have a question.
Yeah.
you mind if I jump in with a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
So we have a question from a member in the audience. We forecast by taking year-to-date expenses through a certain date, plus financial commitments or POs. Our users then add additional expected spend commitments. They also like to drill into details of the GL to assess the nature and accuracy. Can all this be provided through the budgeting module?
In short, yeah. We haven't hopped into reporting, but you could have easily had an actual jet report in that same file that were pulling your actuals. So you could see what you've actually either spent in an expense account with the drill down, or what you spent maybe the previous year. It doesn't matter, but it's all tied back to GP if you wanted an actual report in there. I don't know if I answered all the questions, but there were quite a few points there.
Yeah, I know. I think that's a good answer to that question. And if anyone has more in-depth questions that they want to ask as well, we can always answer those offline too. All right, Michael, I'll let you get back to it.
Okay, sounds good. And so yeah, just so everyone knows, during the beta testing itself, we worked with basically every industry that you could possibly imagine. And one of the things that we found is a lot of the tools that they had been presented with up to this point were a little bit overkill for them, even if they were a larger organization. And really what they were wanting to do is very similar to the question that was asked, is I have a specific way of doing things. And when I get outside of being able to have everything in one place, it becomes difficult. And so that's why we made the decision to stay in Excel, because our reporting module is in there, the budgeting module is in there, and then all of the power of templates and historical data can be there. And so that rang true for pretty much every industry. Now, granted, every industry has different reason, like higher education. They do something called encumbrance, where they're seeing how much they've spent to a certain point and how much is left. Everybody has a different reason, but the end result was I want Excel when I want it, and when I want to get out of Excel, I want to get out of Excel. So the next piece I'm going to look to for just so people can kind of see this is if I go back I'll go into the 2019 budget. I want you to see what it looks like when I assign something to another user. So I'll go into the work section, and we'll come down to, let's do the marketing department. So I'll assign this to another user, and we'll say marketing budget. Okay, so in this case, I actually am using the main accounts over here in a different way, apparently. So for our purposes, it's not super important, but I'm going to give each location its own marketing budget. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and hit next. And then this is where I assign who the approver is. So I'm going to give this to, call him approver Bob or contributor Joe. And at this point, now I can allocate, right? So if I'm signing this out, there are ways to communicate through the assignments themselves. So if I said, for this particular one, we're talking about marketing. So, I really only want to spend $50,000 throughout the whole year on marketing. And then I can go ahead and assign a deadline, and we can say, okay, you have until December 10th, and we can tell them, don't wait till the last minute, please. And so at this point, when I send this out, there's a couple of other options that I have. One is if I know that there are going to be some kind of complex calculations that I'd want included in this particular budget, I can force them to enter data into Excel, and I can also attach files. So any files that I have that I want to load as a supporting document, so specifically, most common things, actuals from last year, or you can actually have budget comparisons from maybe a trend analysis where we're seeing how we've been trending as far as our budgeting to actuals have gone over the last 5 years. So you can see very specifically whatever it is that you're wanting to see before you're entering that information. But once this is done, I can go ahead and hit send or save it as a draft. Once I send this out, we can see that it's not started yet and that it's been assigned to somebody. So over here on the far right-hand side are reminders. And now if I enable reminders, I can actually have reminders sent to all of the individuals who have work items, however often that I want them to be. So in this case, I have a reminder 3 days before the deadline, 1 day after the deadline, and then it just annoys them every day after it's overdue. So instead of you having to email and track this stuff down, you can set these reminders as really ways of kind of poking them without wasting your time, because really it's up to them to be getting this into you, right? And so that's the whole idea behind it. Same is true for an owner or an approver. If anything's submitted, you actually receive email reminders as well. So the workflow and the collaboration piece in between users is really the biggest advantage that Jet Budgets is going to bring to the table. This also will store all of your budget data. So usually the big question for everybody is, can I write this back into GP or my database? Can I write it back into Dynamics? In short, yeah, you absolutely can. Like, we have a way for you to do that. But we also store all of this data. So if the sole reason you're putting this data back into GP is to report off of it, I have good news. You can actually skip that step now, because we're storing all of this data in your own database. We're not holding on to it or keeping it from you. It's your own Jet database, and now you can just report on it from there. So 2 advantages to that. I mean, 1, obviously you get to skip a step, but 2 is it actually can make for faster reporting, because we're not going to your GP database to get the data. We're going to the Jet database. So it doesn't put pressure on your GP system, which can be an advantage as you move along and use this solution long term. Okay, so as far as creating a budget and being able to assign it out, I mean, I've pretty much shown almost everything as far as what a user would be responsible for if they were a budget owner. Now, I want to open it up for questions about the workflow and the collaboration piece before I hop into how you would build a report off of this, which I'm going to do next, just in case there's any other questions that I'm missing, because I can't see that pane, I guess.
Hey, Mike, we do have a question. Are contributors able to add attachments as well as part of this piece?
Yes, they are, actually. So if a contributor to a budget has the need or desire to add a supporting document to justify their entries, yes, they can actually add the supporting documents, yes.
Great. And then we have a couple questions that are coming in surrounding how this product is licensed, and I think maybe we'll just do a little licensing overview at the end after we do the reporting piece.
Yeah, we can absolutely do that. What's great about our licensing is we keep it really simple. It's unlimited users. Okay, so if you're on a Jet product, you're not licensing an owner or a power user. It's just unlimited. Okay. And so we'll get into the licensing at the very end, but that's the simplest answer for you.
Great. All right. think that's all the
Okay,
questions we have right now.
perfect. So, okay, good. I don't have any more slides. All right, so I'm going to go back into this piece here because I'm going to create a new report. So, excuse me, for anyone unfamiliar with JET reports, we are an Excel add-in. And really all that means for you is that we're leveraging half of what you already know, which is Excel, and then the other half is really just a user-friendly way of pulling data down from GP in this case. And so when we're connected, we just point to where the data is, and right here on this right-hand side is where we would see all of your companies. So if you have multiple companies, or maybe you're using some other third-party add-ins where you're combining some of them, all of it would be right here. At this point, the report that I want to build is actually off of a budget. And so I'm going to show you how to build a quick variance report. And the reason that I build this one, obviously it has budgets in it, but I want you to see how straightforward this is, because the popularity of JET, I can assure you, is not based on anything other than the tool itself. It's very intuitive, and it's really built for the average business person in finance or accounting. So all that I've done is I've added in a date range here, which is just first quarter. And the GL function itself, all it is it's a set of questions. So when it says where, all it's doing is asking me where do I want my information returned. And so we could do something as simple as in this cell, give me the balance of a range of accounts or a certain account on a specific day, right? Or an end date. It's totally up to you. In this case, I'm going to use a sheet replicator because I actually want a departmental variance report. Maybe we budget by department specifically, and so that's important for me to see. So I'm going to grab segment 1, which in my chart of accounts, again, is department. And then below this, I'm just going to grab all that information. So I want the account number, the name, the balance during this time, what was the budget, and then we'll use Excel to give me a variance between the two. And so we'll go to account name first. And so in this case, I want the rows themselves to actually replicate. So what I'm saying is I want my information returned in this workbook in rows. What would I like to see is actually a list of accounts. I want all of them. And in any report you do with JET, you're always going to have access to a list where you can see your chart. These are operators that you would become more familiar with over time, but you could do a range or even everything except a certain amount if you were really custom with that. In my case, I want all of them for a specific department. So I'm just going to ask JET to look up at whatever department is up here and pull the entire chart from each department. Now the rest gets pretty easy. All that I'm going to do is say what I want to see is the balance or the account name in this one, and I just point over to the account name. Same with balance. The only difference for balance and budget is I'm going to plug in a date range here. So let me grab the balance for set account, and then I'm going to grab the starting and ending period. You can include unposted activity. This will default to false, but you can set it to true. You could also have multiple companies in here. I only have one, but that's a drop down for that as well. And then I'll drag this over because the only difference here is that I'm actually pulling in a budget and not a balance. So I would simply change that. And then right here are all the budgets that you have. So you can choose to pull those from GP, or you can choose to pull them from JET reports. So it's totally up to you. But once you've selected one, you basically have your budget here, and then a variance, pretty straightforward, is is just subtraction. And so I'm just going to use Excel's functionality to clean it up a little bit, but we're done for the most part. And so this is a good example of a report that you could actually have kind of in any of your other budgeting supporting documents. But this is one that I wanted you to see just how quickly you can build this. And so I'm going to click run. It will query the live data. So whether the budget is stored in JET or in GP, the balance always comes from GP, obviously, but then it'll show you the departmental variance report here. And so one of the questions was about expenses, I believe. I don't really have a lot in terms of expenses. Let's see what this is. But you can drill into any of this information. You could drill back into the budget as well to see what you're actually budgeting for. But the drill down itself, let me pull it over. The drill down itself is meant to be interactive because the first thing it shows is summary level, so credit and debit amount. I don't know if there's going to be journal entries. Oh, I guess there are. So 2 journal entries here. I was hoping for more, but basically what you can do is you can see the originating documents and everything that's associated with those journal entries themselves, and you can even organize it. You could pull any of these columns. So if you had multiple columns, you could organize it by expense categories or something like that. Okay. And so that's just an example of one of the types of reports that can be built using budgeting versus balance. I think it's great because probably in this report, I would use conditional formatting and I would have certain variances highlighted in red, and maybe I would use a if-then statement to actually hide all of the accounts either without a balance or with a variance greater than a certain amount. So again, you can get very custom with this over time as you learn basically how it's used. So there are some other reports that I could run through, but I wanted to make sure to open it up again if there were any questions about kind of the reporting in general off of just that first example.
We have a question about getting to the analytical accounting level for these types of reports.
Okay.
So you can report with analytical accounting data in JET reports, correct, Mike?
Yes.
But as far as budgeting goes with analytical accounting, do you want to touch on that?
Sure. I mean, in short, we do not at this point support analytical accounting for JET budgets. Very straightforward as far as reporting off of that data, but it does not read that unique field, at least in our workflow. So I would definitely suggest working with your partner, KTL, to figure out what the best budgeting process is, because we're always going to be able to read what goes back into GP. It's just not supported in our actual hub budgeting module.
Great, thanks, Mike. That's a good overview there.
Anything else?
I don't see any other questions right now in the chat box.
Okay, cool. I'm going to open up. So a lot of our work these days is converting folks away from Management Reporter or FRX onto our reporting platform. And so I wanted to show you one that we have converted. So this here is basically a profit and loss statement in a packet. So instead of each department having its own tab, what you see is the kind of a packet of reports. And maybe I want to send this out to folks, either outside the organization or within the organization. It's totally up to you. But the reason I'm showing this is where I first discovered that a management reporter, you were actually limited to one budget year per report. So if I was running this report, I'd have to create a new one for each new budget that I had. And so with Jet, that is definitely not the case. You don't have to have your actuals always catching up to your budget, and I'm going to show you why real quick. So if I open this back up, what we see is a lot, right? But it's very straightforward. We have our natural account over here, which is our segment 2 grouping. And all that we've done is we've just asked information of it. So if I open up the GL function, which we saw just a moment ago, the individual who converted this report was familiar, had been using Management Reporter for years and picked up Jet pretty quick, right? He said, in this cell, I want the budget for the given date range. So he used Excel to do the date range, which was smart. He cell referenced his department and location, but since his natural account is segment 2, he kept that static. And then just picked a budget. And what we found is that over time, people start to really get in a certain pattern. They do things a certain way just because that's the way they've always been done. And in this case, even though he'd been cell referencing everything else, he just picked a budget. And we could have easily had another column in here or another filter option pointing to the name of the budget. But that was just what they were used to, which is fine. But that's different here with Jet. So I just want you to know that the flexibility that the reporting platform can bring into the budgeting process can be very powerful, because now you can start comparing budgets to themselves and see the trend analysis for how you've been doing in terms of forecasting as well as future projections. So Jet can make that very straightforward. And also, when I run this report, so these 3 options here are what we call filter options. Historically, you were able to change the fiscal year and current period in Management Reporter, and that was kind of it. Now you can actually, when you hit run, you can choose what company, what department, and slice it by specific locations. So when I mention you can have multiple budgets in the same report, this is where I would have put it. I would have said everything point back to whatever budget we have here, so I could just easily change what budget it is and run the report and get the most current information. So that's definitely one that I wanted to point out. The other piece is our pre-built reports and templates. So we have pre-built for GP 40 reports, and we have templates on the way for Jet budgets. And so when you initially kind of get up and running, we have everything from a standard consolidated profit and loss statement like this one here, all the way to ad hoc analysis, where if we want subledger information like AR aging, you can easily get access to that information and make modifications to these reports as you see fit. Like for this one, for example, maybe I actually want to add the salesperson as a slicer or something like that, whoever the account manager is, and now you have an interactive report. So there's a lot that comes with Jet, but I wanted to see in kind of the short amount of time that I wanted to show reporting that it does bring flexibility to the financial reporting and the budgeting process, as well as give you access to all of your Dynamics data. So with that being said, I'll open it up, I guess, for questions again real quick to see if there's anything else, but that's really what I had intended on showing for budgeting and reporting today with Jet.
Thanks, Mike. It looks like we have one question about, is there a conversion tool from Management Reporter to Jet? Oh, wow, 2 questions actually on that one.
So yes and no. There's no button that you can press and everything just magically goes into Jet. Jet's been around since 2002. I don't think I covered that. It was not created solely to replace Management Reporter, whereas when FRX had the same announcement, Management Reporter was specific for that. But we do have a ton of documentation and really good partners. So KTL is one of them, and they are more than happy to assist with showing you how to convert your reports if you have an interest in learning that, or they'll just help you get them converted. It's pretty straightforward. We have videos and documentation on it, so there's a lot there. You're definitely not on your own, and it is a very brief time to convert all of those reports. It's not like it was when you were maybe trying to relearn Management Reporter or learn Management Reporter for the first time. You already know half of what you need to know if you know Excel.
That's right. That's a good overview. Thanks, Mike. And then another question that we have is around licensing. So do we want to just jump into a little licensing overview for everyone?
Sure. So there are really 2 types of users in Jet. A designer, and they're the ones who actually create the reports. So when I created that report from scratch using the GL function, I was choosing, what can be changed and what's included. That's a designer. And so that person usually knows the information in the database a little bit better than the others. But that's how we license, is per designer, and then also per how many data sources we're actually connecting to. In our case, GP is just one, but on our analytics product, you can really connect to any data source you want, which we didn't jump into analytics today, but that is available. Unlimited viewers. So a viewer is anybody who consumes a report, meaning they run it, they want to drill into the data, or they want to be a part of the budgeting process. Those 3 things a viewer is capable of and does not cost anything. So that's unique to Jet, but again, I just want to be clear, you're just licensing designers and how many data sources you're connecting to.
Great, thanks, Mike. And I think just another thing to touch on, which I think we mentioned at the beginning, but just so everyone remembers, the budgeting module isn't really a standalone product. It has to be used in conjunction with the Jet Pro reporting module.
Correct. Yeah, Jet Budgets is not standalone. There are 2 different options in terms of what's available with Jet. I think it's really actually kind of illuminated well in the Jet Hub. If we go to the reporting section, we'll see basically some reports once it decides to load up. But the Jet reports will handle Jet budgets. So you don't necessarily need a data warehouse or a BI platform to have report scheduling and budgets. If we're wanting to connect to outside data sources, so more than just GP, and create nice dashboards that are mobile friendly and actually start building in, maybe key performance indicators, or just making reporting easier, faster, simpler in general, we have a product called Jet Analytics that can handle that. And so this is just kind of a brief preview of what one of those dashboards looks like. And so and obviously you can slice this data however you want, but that's really the two options. Jet Budgets is available with both.
Great.
Anything else?
I think that's all the questions we have right now. If anyone has any additional questions, feel free to email me or your other account rep at KTL, and we can get together with Jet and get all of your questions answered surrounding this. We've also recorded this webinar, so we're going to be sending out the recording so you can share it internally if you have any other members of your staff that weren't able to view it today.
Awesome. And one last thing I'll add, Mary. Reach out, whoever invited you today. There are year-end offers that are exclusive to folks either on this webinar or working with KTL and Jet. So bring it up, ask about it. So it's something that you can definitely take advantage of.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Mike, for joining us today and giving us all this great information. I just want to thank everyone who logged in today. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day.
Yep, same here. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.